Um, Jesus Christ. Okay, let's talk about woke corporatism. And can we open up? This is a great piece that was published in the Bellows. Can you open that, David?
Yeah, just one moment. Yeah, Jesus. Hold on, sorry.
So basically, I've been thinking a lot about this.
Here we go.
And this is a great piece. I should say, friend of show, Cedric Michael Simmons. I'm black and I'm afraid of white fragility. Although she had little medical training, Thanos founder Elizabeth Holmes claimed that she invented a foolproof way. Theranos, excuse me. Oh, Thanos. Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes claimed she invented a foolproof way to test blood using a single drop. Drawing on her connections to the wealthy and powerful, Holmes was able to raise millions of dollars and attract a lot of media hype. Quote, Holmes isn't the only charlatan peddling cures. Enter diversity trainer and education scholar Robert DiAngelo, who's offering a simplistic remedy to racism via her book, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard to Talk to White People About Racism. And he goes on to talk about how, the book is #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. She was just on Jimmy Fallon. This is the pop culture answer at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just scroll down a little bit more?
Oh, yes, sir.
There was a few more things that I wanted to read before we launch into this. What becomes clear, getting past the introduction to white fragility, is really an expression of DiAngelo's own guilt and fear about her contradictory role as a Euro-American racial dialogue manager. She gets paid to be an expert on race and racism, despite the fact that she believes that white folks can never be an expert on race and racism. Regardless of why DiAngelo wrote the book, our goal is to address racism and inequality in ways that serve the interests of poor and working people. There are many reasons to be worried about white fragility's popularity. Mm-hmm. To begin with, DiAngelo views racism as a problem to be combated with sensitivity training. The premise of diversity and cultural competency training is that by educating European Americans on the persistence and consequences of Americans as consequences of racism, they can be transferred into non-racist or ideally anti-racist individuals. But diversity training has been shown to be a largely ineffective way of addressing racism in the workplace. And he clicks on an article, we'll open it later, that shows, this has been actually academically studied, and the results, as should be obvious, are not that deep. Mm-hmm. These lectures and workshops do little in the way of addressing the structural tensions that workers navigate on a daily basis. As Frank Dobson noted in his book, Inventing Equal Opportunity, such trainings often are merely a clever way of establishing legal protections for firms facing accusations of discrimination. Now go on, and that these trainings can even reinforce bias. All right, there's a few other things that I want to read here. It's such a great piece. There's an essential problem at play here. White fragility actually reinforces racist beliefs. Sociologists generally agree with the notion that ethnicity can refer to an individual identity that individual communities assert, but races are labels that are ascribed to individuals. Scholars such as Barbara E. Fields and Adolph Reed Jr., and amusingly, DiAngelo's fellow traveler Ibram Kendi, have repeatedly noted that racist beliefs and practices assume and reify the belief that nature produced different types of human beings with unique inborn attributes. DiAngelo doesn't talk about quote-unquote supposed racial differences in skull or intellectual capacity, but the book is filled with associations of race with physiological differences. Anyways, and he goes on to basically say, if I'm a corporation, I don't want the conversation about my policies and how things are distributed. I want the conversation about you as an employee. And just as we were talking about with Joanna Wiest, even, great, as long as there's at-will employment in this country, you can be fired if you can hide the tracks because of your identity. That's the bottom line. Unite Here is organizing against Starbucks right now because it cannot be legally proven, and Starbucks loves to show itself as being socially progressive. they say inside the company, I completely believe them, of course, that there's discriminatory practices against Black employees and trans employees. And so what we have right now is this enormous phenomenal uprising about racism, about brutality, about policing. And it is getting funneled into an anemic Democratic Party policy response, along with embarrassing cultural gestures, a massive boom in the corporate training circuit, and which is, I mean, it's despicable. I mean, the amount of money that D'Angelo is getting paid to do these things, and plenty like her, could be used to literally being saving people's jobs.
Yeah.
Like actual things. Like it's only enforcing wealth inequality. And now, and of course, a new way, and then embarrassing dumb shit like taking off TV shows or whatever, or ending satire. And then another wave of people being disgusting, toxic, moralistic to each other on social media. These are, and you have to see how these things, it's not just that they're wrong and they don't address the vital issues that the uprisings are pointing to. They are a function of the same predator system that produced all these problems to begin with. If you're on Twitter being an asshole and canceling and all this trash, not only are you just, that sucks, but you are feeding the algorithm. You're there, you're serving the function of these companies. That's what you're doing. And this whole exporting that somehow people uprising against murder and everything associated with it in terms of race and class and power structure in this country has been funneled into the corporate training racket. You really need to see how these things function. You need to see that McDonald's is going to put out talking about amplifying Black voices. And it's not just, see, there's two big misinterpretations of it. There's people on the right, they go, see, you're just part of the mainstream. These uprisings aren't real. Bullshit, because none of this stuff is about what was centered in those uprisings. But then there's a lot of people on the left that just say like, oh no, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. It's not what the protest is about, not what the protest is about. Well, as Bill Fletcher Jr. said, those who have power get to determine what demands are about. And this several weeks in is what we're getting manifested. A new wave of toxic social practices and absolute bullshit trainings that just even on an intellectual and personal level, like the fact that people aren't figuring out how to read Cabral or Malcolm X or Fanon or Walter Rodney or the Field Sisters.
Yeah, it's just like,
I mean, it's even taken in its own terms, it's actually quite disgusting.
I've tried to jump into it, right? Just because it's now become something that's important. You can't, because literally the very beginning of this book, White Fragility, is like, we can never do anything about racism. Like if you're a white person, you can never do anything about it. You just have to constantly do the work. And doing the work is buying my books and going to these constant seminars, right? It's so tragic on one level, but it's also it's like exactly what this kind of political culture deserves, right? Is it's just like this fixation that the fundamental structural problems of like race and economic inequality in this country are going to be fixed through HR policies is absolutely ridiculous.
And that you should spend your whole life monitoring yourself and monitoring others, because all this stuff is magical, spooky things in the brain. It's a Scientology. It's not. Do you think Ronnie Kasrils fought shoulder to shoulder for decades to destroy apartheid? That Joshua Heschel marched, because he was sitting there being like, oh no, I better check myself. I did a microaggression. If you, and again, it's so fundamentally reinforcing of just people monitoring and either being bad to each other or even just really unfairly taking on massive social problems and making them about you as an individual. It's sick.
And it's just like, I mean, I just want to say specifically about this book and the work, like, let's not forget where the context of where this theory gets developed, right? This is somebody who gets hired by a company or corporation or major nonprofit, and they say, okay, it looks like we might have a problem right? Because there's some event that happened, or they say, we want to show and present ourselves as a corporation or a company that has the good culture, right? And they have this person come in and basically in a space that they designate as like, oh, this is a safe space or whatever, but it's a space that they're monitored in, that like people who are like at their jobs are being forced to go to. It's something that's completely mediated by class and economic power. And this person is sitting there acting like they're participating in some kind of grand narrative that is going to like free people, when fundamentally what they're doing is they are operating as a shield for corporations to prevent them from being sued or prevent them.
It's about presenting lawsuits against discriminatory policies, which still exist, discriminatory practices, not policies, practices, which exist all over the place. And on the other hand, another mechanism by which it's easier to fire people and coerce people.
Mm-hmm.
Because now all of a sudden, it's like, hey, Bob said that he doesn't see any problem with a white guy doing the voice in Family Guy. Oh, well, that's fired.
Yeah.
We wanted to get rid of his benefit package anyways.
YouTube is, or not YouTube, Starbucks is cutting their advertising spend to social media because of hate speech.
I am so sure of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly why they're pulling back, and it's going to implicate tons of livelihoods in the middle of a depression pandemic. That's exactly right. So when you feed this stuff, you're feeding toxicity, you're being a sucker, and you're insulting, again, just even on an intellectual level. Like it is incredible. You're not reading the Field Sisters. You're not it's just,
you're
reading this fucking trash and making it about you.
Yes, exactly. Because like fundamentally what this book specifically is, and the culture that it comes from, is a politics that is like, it doesn't go anywhere. It's very like Joe Biden-esque. It's something that liberals like to do a lot, right? Where they can say like, well, here's a social problem and I'm going to recognize it. Right? You can never do anything by the logic of white fragility and like that whole movement. You can never really do anything about it. All you can do is just constantly be aware about it. It completely forecloses any kind of radical change or radical shift. And if you read the stuff in the book, I mean, it's wacky stuff. I mean, Matt Taibbi did a pretty fun,
it was fun
overview of it. But the Jackie Robinson example, where basically, she doesn't see Jackie Robinson like. Her like version of the Jackie Robinson story completely denies Jackie Robinson's incredible ability as an athlete and as a human being for going through and basically breaking through the barrier of like a horribly racist, sports system, right? And it completely takes away any of his agency, and it's all about, just like the white power structure. It's like
I also just think too, like, look, I'm going to say this unapologetically, the way like racists and like this is old news for people in this space, but like, yes, everybody knows that racists from time immemorial, I mean, as soon as he said it, or as soon as they decided to distort Dr. King's legacy and talk about, content of character, not skin, blah, 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 like, Sam Harris kind of bullshit that denied the material reality of racism prevalent in our society across the board. Absolutely. And at the same time, following in a Marxist tradition, ANC tradition, like, no, I don't think the project is to just endlessly reify and essentialize.
Exactly.
No, it's not. There actually is a dialectic. And part of the problem, I mean, of innumerable problems of any type of discrimination or viciousness based on identity is that you are oppressing different categories, but you are also negating individual expression.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot just reduce it to a set of magical pre-prescribed interpersonal practices. It's sick, and it only works, again, like, it's no mistake. Bill Fletcher Jr. is not going on Jimmy Fallon and talking about Reconstruction and talking about capital. And so, like, it's a corporate trainer.
Yep.
Who can teach companies how to cover their asses and people to be assholes or weirdos to each other.
It's safe. It's supposed to be toothless. It's supposed to take energy and just make you run around in circles, right? Like a dog chasing their tail. It's just like there is no end in sight to that kind of politics, and that's the point. It's to like people are mad. And like I will say this because I can understand how some people will get frustrated because some people say like, well, this is an important first step for people. Like, you know, it means something to like participate in this. And then like, we know that this isn't the end all be all, but it's just the beginning. You know what? I'm sorry. Like, I understand that. Like, I do think like, here's the point. It is a good thing that people are trying to do something or like want to do something or want to address the problem.
Of course.
But what we're trying to say is that these systems and this book specifically, they operate to try to prevent that from going anywhere else. They operate to try to stop that energy from moving out into the general population, start, you know, asking serious questions. Don't forget, this is all mediated through work. I mean, it's the whole conception of the white fragility thing really is, it's addressing a worker in an office space. How do you act around, you know, like the, you know, POC coworkers and colleagues, right? Which, like, I think there's truth that a lot of people do need like serious help with that, right? But the point is not to fundamentally change any of these dynamics. It's to keep them the same, but just to have people sort of, you know, who have some bad feelings about it, who want to do something, want to keep them from taking that energy into a kind of productive route.
How much work would be done if we had broad-based public labor and work unions that were ran definitionally and in leadership? Because actually, to the extent studies have shown what shifts interpersonal attitudes, and actually to the extent you can measure these things in a real way, getting rid of bigoted and grotesque attitudes, it is to be either in a subordinate work position to somebody of color or in a genuine peer-to-peer relationship, which she, by the way, says is just completely impossible. Mm-hmm. Not that, like, of course it's always a factor, of course it's there, but impossible? I mean, that's also to be just a product of like just pure suburban mindset. I mean, this is somebody who's never been in like the clash of any type of dynamic life anywhere. Mm-hmm. And I pray this is not exported internationally.
Just really quickly, like as one last point, to like the kind of class narrative and like the way that this like ideology like is so toxic. I don't remember if we played it or not, but this was maybe a couple months ago when like the movements and the protests first started. But there was a clip of like a white activist coming up to this group of people and saying, if you're a white person, this is not your hood. Like, we're having a white solidarity march over there. You have to go over there. Everyone in the crowd immediately starts yelling at this person, saying, what the hell are you trying to do to divide us? You know, which was a really inspiring and important, I think, at least for me. It's like, okay, well, this stuff doesn't have a lot of currency on the ground, which is important. But like, not to focus too much on this individual, it's just amazing to me to sit there and say, like, Jesus Christ, does this person not think that any white person in this crowd is there with, you know, their partner or their best friend or their community? Like, this idea actually that just because like you might come from like a segregated, you know, worldview and community, that everyone else is like, you know, lives that experience, it's ridiculous.
No, but it's even deeper than that, because it's a practice of literally putting like physical solidarity on the ground, which she's trying to reverse engineer into, I mean, literally in that instance, like woke segregation. Like, that's actually really sick. Mm-hmm. And again, there's no, read the Freedom Charter of the ANC. Read what it said. Like, there are nationalist liberation struggles. That's fine. It's not our politics. There's a reason I was never a Zionist. I never thought that the be-all, end-all of politics was that. Anyways, and you know, let alone some type of weird HR manual.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.